Good day, folks, and welcome. What was that? Huh. Well, it's October. I guess anything horrifying will happen. Anyways, good day, folks, and welcome to the Anorak Review Show with our host, the Anorak. And we're halfway through October as we're in the third week of Anoraknoween. Last week I looked at Elton John's Leather Jackets, an album that he himself considered to be the weakest album he had ever made. And after having listened to it, I can understand why he would feel such a way, but at the same time, I can't help but kind of not mind it as much. I mean, it's not exactly flawless, and it's nothing too spectacular compared to his more well-known albums, but it's far from being terrible and downright horrible. It's passable at best. And today we're looking at another album of his, one made 10 years earlier, and one that he considered one of his favourites. And without further ado, that album happens to be named Blue Moves. And in some sort of contrast to the previous album, this one has more of a simple colour palette to it. As you can imagine with an album called Blue Moves, you can imagine that the album's cover itself is very cyan-ish, tealish. Now, of course, this was actually adapted from a painting by an artist named Patrick Proctor, and the name of the painting itself is called The Guardian Readers, in which, judging from from some of the people there, they probably must be reading something or some sheets of white. And of course, being a double album, this is another gatefold. As you can imagine, I can be a sucker for gatefolds, as I may have brought up once or twice before. Featuring various members of Elton John's group that were involved with this particular album. All his folks right here, with Elton there, and another one all to himself. So you can imagine he actually had fun making this one, as opposed to Leather Jackets, where he was apparently coked out of his mind, if word is to be believed. With that little analysis off the way, let's take a look at the very long album, possibly Elton's longest album ever, and see if this holds up any better than the one that came out 10 years later. We open with Your Starter 4, with ellipses at the end, the 3 dots, because mysterious, pausing, I don't know, I guess because it looks cool. Anyways, this is a very short instrumental piece at about 1 minute and 23 seconds, and at first hearing, this too sounds like nothing you'd think of if or whenever you'd hear the name Elton John. And hell, even Bunny Taupin didn't even write this. Instead, the sole credit of this goes to a man named Caleb Quay, who was a studio session guitarist who worked with Elton John on many of his albums up to this point. Plus, he would go on to work with various other artists, the likes of Lou Reed and Dusty Springfield. And the track itself has a bit of a light whimsy feel to it. It almost sounds like the opening theme music to like an old children's TV show or something. And it has a bit of a Genesis vibe to the guitar itself. And it kind of continues on, builds on that little guitar riff with some synth bits from James Newton Howard, who I forgot to mention was also involved with the Leather Jackets album, released 1 or 2 tracks, kind of emulating some horns, kind of giving it a semi-orchestral feel to it. All in all, it's a very sudden, abrupt, but still very interesting way to open such an album like this. Next is a proper song simply titled Tonight. Not Tonight Tonight by the Smashing Pumpkins, nor Tonight, Tonight, Tonight by Genesis. No, this is simply One Tonight. And right off from the get-go, this is definitely unique for an Elton John song. The opening piano has this solemn mood to it, and possibly due to it being played in like a minor key, it's slow, it's atmospheric, it paints this abstract yet sorrowful picture. Then about 35 seconds in, the tone then picks up as a backing orchestra comes into play. And from what I looked up, this is most likely the London Symphony Orchestra. Yes, that London Symphony Orchestra. And boy, do they load a pack right here. It almost sounds cinematic in a way, almost like music out of a film soundtrack or a musical movie even. Then after 3 minutes into the song itself, Elton actually finally sings, and boy does he press it right to the feels. Here he kind of asks if we should fight again, and kind of pleads how much he wants to sleep and turn off the light, but we, you, us, the listeners, seem to carry some grudges. Through these simple lyrics and more, Elton seems to imply the aftermaths of a breakup of sorts. And with that in mind, the music and the lyrics fit together very well. It creates this emotional and sorrowful piece. I think it's one of the closest times Elton's ever done something of the prog rock style. You know, extended sections, not really having the basic verse chorus structure, but also kind of playing around with that kind of formula, but still kind of having telling a story in a way with very simple themes, but still very deep and emotional enough. And of course, it kind of bookends by ending out with the same piano melody as the opening. It's honestly probably one of my favorite songs from Elton John's discography. And I'm kind of saddened that this doesn't get any more recognition as other more famous and almost just as epic songs Elton's done before or ever since. Then we have One Horse Town. Is Elton going to take his horse to the Old Town Road? Well, kind of, sort of, not exactly. This song begins with a very slow and quiet synth melody, which kind of goes on for about 45 seconds before it blasts off into a collage, a very chunky collage of psychedelic guitars and orchestral strings, and it almost seems somehow becomes all upbeat and almost kind of pro-disco like, or a term I would use for it is disco rock fusion. In terms of local content, Elton seems to sing about a quiet and isolated little town in the sweet home of Alabama, and here he kind of laments about it, kind of expressing how there's not a lot to do around there. There's not even anything worth stealing, hence why there's not much crime going on there. Then he expresses how he would rather get out of that town and kind of go somewhere else. And then it kind of all ends with this strange ascending synth note that kind of gives off reminds one of a rising UFO or something. So was he picked up by aliens or something? Did they help him get out of that town? Anything's possible, even in music. But anyways, this is another strange yet very unique song that only someone like Elton John and Bernie Taupin could create. And honestly, it's very strange, but also very, very active and very fun. Almost as fun as you expect from any good Elton John song. And side A ends with Chameleon. No, not the calmer kind, or nor is it about the Marvel Spider-Man supervillain, but rather about a woman who was last seen in a cruise to the Mediterranean. Then sometime later, she and the singer would eventually meet again back in the English rain. And of course, he then goes on to compare her to a chameleon in the chorus, obviously likely referring to how she not only disappears but also deceives. And he even kind of name drops the Elvis Presley song Devil in Disguise. The music itself does indeed does sound like that classic Elton John style that most people would think of and associate with the artist himself, with the piano itself taking full front and center stage, while the backing vocals have a bit of this ELO Jeff Lynne vibe to them, especially when they sing the chorus bit of Chameleon, and though the jazzy instruments in the background do give it that little extra flavor of not exactly exoticness, but still very soothing comfort. And so far, these songs aren't actually quarter bad. So, let's see if the rest of the album can keep up to that, shall we?